Okay, welcome. I'm so happy to see all of you wonderful people here today. Happy 3-day weekend to probably a few of you.
I'm retired every day.
We're still waiting to see if winter is going to arrive here on the Kitsap Peninsula, but I guess we'll just have to wait. While we're waiting, today we're going to have some great speakers who are going to be giving us some ideas on ways to become better stewards of the land on which we live. I want to direct your attention to a few things. Back in the little table near the food is some info on the Hallsbow Pollinator Project. And it's a wonderful project, and if you're interested in it and what's happening, there's some information there and ways that you can donate. There's stickers there that the kids from Hilda Pearson, who are also involved in the project, have created. They're so adorable. So anyways, take a look at that. Of course, we have plenty of hot tea and coffee and treats and numerous books, articles that you can check out. You know, if you're interested in a book, take a picture. There's some great ones. We're also trying to be more child-friendly. So Susan back there has been working hard to create our area for kids or fidgety adults that want to be doing something while they're watching. Let's see, I think probably not everybody knows that there's bathrooms across the hall there. And I just have one request, and that's if you know of anybody in the county that would like to be interested in leading our book club. We want to start a book club, but most of us are pretty overextended as it is, and we'd love to, we have a couple people who are interested in helping out, but we need a leader. So the idea is to kind of, you know, get us some focus down in Central and South Kitsap. So anyways, if you know somebody, let me know. And now, where's Carla?
Right here.
Okay. Carla's going to read the guiding principles for KEC.
Do I need a microphone? I guess I do. Hi. We acknowledge our presence on the ancestral lands of the Coast Salish people. We build community by forming honest, respectful relationships with all people affected by KEC's work. We use scientific data and inquiry methods for decision-making. We support nature's well-being locally and more broadly within the Pacific Northwest ecosystem. We embrace inclusion and recognize we all bring different experiences, talents, perspectives, and strengths to KEC. Thank you. Thanks.
Okay, so I'm just going to show a real short little video that somebody brought to my attention the other day, and it really made me happy, and I hope it makes you happy.
If you listen closely, the land is never silent. It's always singing a song of gifts, a melody of birds and berries and blossoms. But lately, we've heard a different sound, a mantra of destruction which values profit over planet. The chant, "Drill, baby, drill," is an affront to pretty much everything I have dedicated my life to. And perhaps you feel that dissonance too. But now plants, they know what to do to slow climate change. They protect biodiversity, they build fertile soil, but they can't do it alone. So here's the invitation to join the choir. Let's replace that extractive chorus of "drill, baby, drill" with a regenerative one of "plant, baby, plant." With seeds and shovels, we can enact nature-based climate solutions in our own neighborhoods. This is more than gardening. This is creative resistance. We are planting a flag that says, no more destruction, not on our beloved land. Are you ready to raise a garden and raise a ruckus? Bring your shovel, bring your song, bring your gifts. Let's stand with the good green world and answer its generosity in kind. Plant, baby, plant.
Our first speaker, Dana Bressette, thank you so much for being here today, is plant production manager and sales consultant at Woodbrook Native Plant Nursery in Gig Harbor. Has anybody been there? I have. Have you, Joe? She has a master's degree in urban horticulture from UW, where she studied possible causes of decline for the Pacific Madrone, which sounds really cool. She is an avid gardener and designed and installed a green roof on an auxiliary building at their property. She is here to share her wealth of knowledge on native plants. So let's welcome Dana. Do you want me to click it or do you just want to take over? I want to thank Sir for helping me on this.
Hi there.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, when I agreed to do this, I told them I have my own personal website as well as the nursery website, my boss's website. So I often have given talks through the years, and when they chose this particular one, I pulled it up and, oh, I haven't given this one for a while, but so when I was reviewing it, I added a few more photos. But so this one is about healthy landscapes for people and wildlife. A lot of it isn't going to be a lot about native plants, although that's. I also have I have two websites. One is kind of a native plant encyclopedia, and the other one is kind of a habitat horticulture, where I talk about lots of other things that you can do, not necessarily with native plants. So let's get in there. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah, it seems weird that I have to hold the microphone so close here.
Yeah.
So one thing I like to talk about is when I went to school at WSU back in the 80s, most of the research was funded by pesticide companies and that kind of thing. So it was a big turnaround to try and get to where we're not using so many pesticides. I was so happy. Years ago, I worked for the Park District in Tacoma, and we used to use such nasty chemicals all the time. It just drove me crazy. And I was so happy when I worked at the conservatory at Wright Park, and we transitioned over to some more natural pest control options. But, so gardening should be green. But so often, you walk into a Home Depot and what are they selling? All those garden chemicals all the time, pesticides for the perfect lawn and all that kind of thing. So I kind of want to talk about things you can do to try and get away from that. So this is kind of an outline of my talk. So habitat horticulture for people and wildlife. Some of what I'm going to talk about is just kind of basic horticulture, botany things. I'll just, this is kind of a basic thing. I'll be talking about all of these things later on in my talk, so I don't want to spend too much time on that slide. One of the things I always like to talk about in most of my talks is our climate. So why is Washington the evergreen state? Anybody have any idea why we have so many conifers in our state? Yeah?
Well, we're part of the coastal temperate rainforest.
It is, but actually when you think about, you know, the latitude, if you go all the way across to the east coast, like New Brunswick, they still have deciduous forests. Most of the time you hear about evergreen forests being further north. But the reason we end up having so many conifers is because of our, well, I'll go on to the next slide, but I kind of like this thing about our state and provincial trees. You know, Oregon has the Douglas fir, ours is the western hemlock, British Columbia the western red cedar, Alaska has the Sitka spruce. So all of those are our big conifers. So why do we have mostly coniferous forests? It has to do with our climate. You know, I always like to tell people who from out of the States, one of Seattle area's greatest secret is our dry summers. So if you look at this, I don't know, if you look at our, this diagram here, this was probably pretty old. With climate change, it probably has changed a bit, but you can, this is a map that shows from January to December rainfall graphed along temperature. And you can see, you know, in winter and spring and fall, we have a lot of rain. But in summer, we have that dry period. And in the rest of the country, you know, that summer season is considered the growing season. Well, plants can't grow if they're not getting what?
Water.
Yeah. So conifers are adapted. They can just shut down and not grow, but they can grow even in the wintertime if temperatures are appropriate. So that's their strategy, is they can photosynthesize whenever temperatures and they have enough, when temperatures are appropriate and they have enough rainfall. And so you have here the, whoops, getting used to this mouse here. There we go. So you can see here we have a lot of variation in how much rainfall we get, you know, from the Hoe to Squim, and then there's Gig Harbor gets about 39 inches a year. So there is a lot of variation there. So as a horticulturist, you know, when I'm helping people choose plants, you know, one of the first things I ask them, well, do you have sun or shade? You know, so because shade, if you don't have light, you don't have life. Years ago when I worked at the conservatory, we had a little gift shop there with plants, and people would come in, oh, I want a house plant, but I have no light. And I'm like, well, try silk or you gotta get light. You know, you can't grow a plant without light. So those are some of the considerations you want to take when you're deciding what plants you want to choose. So talking about, and I also like to talk about the natural ecology of our areas. So basically, you know, mostly the native natural ecology is forests. We're in the western hemlock zone here. And you know, when people come to the nurseries as they want something for sun, we don't have a whole lot of plants that are good for sun. Because forest is kind of the natural thing. And then of course over on the coast, this kind of shows here, this is the western hemlock zone, and then the lighter green is the Sitka spruce zone. This is Sitka spruce, although there's a lot of big leaf maples in there too. And then of course you've got the subalpine areas. Why isn't it not clicking? What am I clicking on? Oh, there, whoops. I should do the arrows instead of the map. So open areas, since forests are kind of the natural way of things, open areas are usually caused by some kind of a disturbance. Fire, well, we've been hearing a lot about fires lately. That'll open up an area. Windfalls, flooding, logging, and volcanic blast. So I think that one is actually from Northwest Track, but you can see evidence of logging there in the past. And up to the left, that's actually an oak prairie, which is a more natural area. We do have some places where we have oak prairies. Wetland habitats. Now this is the one I was looking at and I'm like, oh wow, that's changed a lot. The top left-hand corner is a bog that is on our property, or what I should say was on our property 20 years ago. I put the dates in there. But because of beaver activity upstream, it's now more open water. So I included a picture I just took this week. It's kind of hard to see, but it's more open water. In the summertime, it's actually full of pondweed. But, so that's kind of an example of how landscapes will change too. Landscapes are not static, they're dynamic. And then over here, you've got seasonal ponds. This is the pond on my property as well, and on my front property. I always used to joke that when my son was young, that's where we would collect tadpoles all the time. And that's where he and his friends would always end up when I kicked them out of the house to get away from computers and video games. They were always ended up in the frog pond. So the wetland habitats, and the main thing about here is that they're good for wildlife. So when you're planning your landscape, the one thing you want to talk about is what are your goals? So what do you want your landscape to provide? Well, most of us want it to be beautiful. So that's where you want to take into consideration the principles of design. I took flower arranging when I was in college too. Scale, form, texture, color, focus, balance. Those are the principles of design. With plants, you can also have fragrance. And I like this one, the movement is I like a quaking aspen. That one, I always love that tree because it quivers in the wind. Also at the nursery, people are always wanting something for screening. Unfortunately, our best native plant for screening is Pacific wax myrtle, and we're always selling out of that one. I always tell people, I was talking about conifers. Most of our evergreens are the big, tall conifers. You don't have a whole lot of shrubs that are evergreen that are good for screening. Maybe a tall Oregon grape, huckleberry and slough, but they grow so slow, so they're not going to make a hedge real quick. So you also want to think about recreation, play surfaces. I always say the only reason for a lawn is for a play surface, for your kids, for your pets, or for sports or whatever. And then outdoor living spaces. I was all happy when I finally got a little patio out in front of my house. And roads, paths, walkways. Just before I came in here, we had our dog in the car, and we took her for a walk out here, and they've been doing lots of work out here, getting rid of a lot of the invasive species out there. I'm just very impressed with that. And food, do you want to have food in your landscape? And wildlife habitat. So those are ideas to think about. And just some basic horticulture thing about soils. Most of our soils come from glacial till, a result of volcanoes and then glaciers. So mostly it's a mixture of clay, sand, and gravel deposited by glaciers. This is kind of the classic horticultural soil triangle. Generally, they have your soil is classified by how much sand it has, how much silt, and how much clay. And generally, a loam soil, which is kind of the middle of that, is considered ideal. If it has too much sand, then it drains too fast. If it has too much clay, then it doesn't drain at all. And there's ways of trying to test that out, whether you have, what kind of soil you have. Soil preparation. This is what I say for most native plants. Most trees and shrubs require little preparation as long as the soil is well drained and the topsoil hasn't been removed. Basically, you dig the hole, you plant it, try and keep the plant at the same level in the soil as it was in the pot. But evergreen shrubs and maybe some perennials things sometimes benefit with more organic matter, either incorporated into the soil or added at the top. So if drainage is a problem, careful selections of the plants or construction of berms or raised beds. You might want to test the pH, nutrient availability of the soil. You know, I bought those little test kits before, or you can send it to a lab. I haven't done that in a long time, so I'm not sure what labs are even available anymore. You could check with your master gardeners. So this is a picture from one of my worm bin one year when it was really, really cold out, and I looked in and they were all clustered together. So basically, and also, you know, the microfauna in your soil is very important. You know, it's full of bacteria, algae, fungi, insects, worms. They're all important for a healthy soil. You know, of course, you don't want some of the bad things, but if there's enough good things, they overwhelm the bad things. And I always love this quote here in Charles Darwin. He quoted one time that the formation of vegetable mold through the action of worms, he wrote, "I was thus led to conclude that all the vegetable mold over the whole country has passed many times through and will again pass many times through the intestinal canals of worms." So Darwin was into a lot of different things. So this was kind of an old slide of mine, soil mixes. I used to use Tagro a lot, so I kind of amended this. Do you know what Tagro is? Well, Tagro, basically a manure that comes from the wastewater treatment in Tacoma. Okay, they would mix the waste with sand, and it would make, you know, it's supposedly certified by the health department, but it would make a good fertilizer for your plants. And they also make a potting mix too. But anyway, you know, I always hate when I go to a store and want to buy soil and I can't see the soil. It's in the bag, you can't see it. I want to touch it and I want to feel it. Because a lot of times those bagged soils have such garbage, woody material that aren't very good. So even when I buy soil, I'm always amending it with my own worm compost or other compost or, you know, I try and stick away from peat moss now because it's mined up in Canada and stuff, and go more with the organic or the coconut coir, and then perlite or pumice. You know, so perlite and pumice makes it so it drains better. And then you add appropriate organic fertilizers. So again, in basic botany, you know, if plants weren't around, we wouldn't be here. Because they're the ones that produce our food through photosynthesis. And, you know, all they need is CO2 and water and light to make food. And then, alternatively, when they use that food, they respire as well. And so when I was in college, I learned this little mnemonic to help me remember what nutrients plants need. And it was C. Hopkins Cafe, managed by my cousins Mo and Cleo. And then since then they've added more. But basically the carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, phosphorus, potassium, nitrogen, sulfur, calcium, iron, and so on. So all those important, you know, I'm always, you know, kind of, you know, my son just got this hydroponic thing, and other people I know have done hydroponic stuff, and I'm like, I just kind of roll my eyes because it's like there's so many ways for it to fail. because you need to have all those nutrients in there. And you know, and plus the right light and everything else. But if they can do it, that's great. But you know, just be aware that it's very difficult. And so if they don't get the proper nutrients, then you get these nutrient deficiencies. And again, appropriate temperatures are needed. So just quick about planting, you know, again, like I said before, you dig the hole and you plant it. At least the same level. We usually recommend 2 or 3 times as wide. I don't necessarily do that all the time. And then you can kind of construct a basin later. This was actually at Camp Seymour YMCA years ago. They planted these trees. I think they've removed a lot of those trees now, or those shrubs and trees now, but years later. But my husband worked for the YMCA. We used to do a lot of things at Camp Seymour there. Mulches, you know, mulches is such an important thing. It does so many different things. It helps reduce weeds by preventing the germination and preventing the growth of weed seeds. Helps prevent wind and water erosion, keeps roots insulated. And, you know, I recommend trying to stick with the natural mulches, bark, and so on. Of course, some people will want something that looks pretty as well. But it's not necessary, but depending upon, you know, like in a garden, you know, maybe straw is okay, but in a landscape, you might want something nicer looking. I mean, and I have before, like, my husband laughs at me because, you know, what do I do with these old jeans? I'm like, sometimes I'll just throw old jeans or old, you know, fabrics out as a mulch. And the biggest thing you want to do is make sure you can reduce chemical use. You know, we all live downstream, including the birds, bees, flowers, trees, fishes. You know what? And I haven't heard reports recently, but you know, the Puget Sound has been polluted a lot with chemicals, and more you hear in the news about those forever chemicals in our environment, and you want to try and stay away from that. So, you know, one of the things I learned in my schooling was integrated pest management. You want to, you know, sometimes just because you see a little notch in a leaf doesn't mean you have to go and spray, or some little bug and you spray, you know. I have this picture here of like a ladybug larva. And one time somebody says, oh, I got these bugs all over my tree. And I'm like, oh, they're ladybug larvae. You don't want to kill them. They're eating the aphids on your tree. But they didn't believe me. They want to go out and spray. So you want to be able to identify the pest. Or maybe it's not a pest. And make sure you have good identification. And, you know, figure out your acceptable damage levels. You know, if you get past what's acceptable, then you decide on a treatment. You know, so you monitor, identify the pests, so choose your least toxic alternative. You know, first mechanical, just maybe, sometimes you can just spray them off or pick them off. Maybe biological or natural or synthetic pesticides. And also read the labels. Caution is least toxic. Warning, you know, in between danger is the most toxic. Although remember, those warning labels only takes into lethal dose. It doesn't take into consideration long-term effects or whether they're carcinogenic. You know, I mean, the big thing right now is about Roundup or glyphosate. I know I was just reading an article the other day about, apparently they're spraying Roundup on wheat to let it dry in the field. So you're getting Roundup on your wheat, on your flour. So that's why I started trying to get organic flour. And I guess there was something that Ron DeSanto's wife said about bread. And they're saying, oh, no, the levels of glyphosate and wheat is not that high. But, you think about how that accumulates, so I want to try and stay away from that. Anyway, and also, there's some reports that it's, glyphosate has something to do with autism as well. But anyway, I think it's best to stay away from it if we can. Efficient irrigation, no blue, no green. If you don't have water, you're not going to have a living plant. The most common reason for failure in gardens and landscapes is inadequate irrigation or conversely overwatering. So, I don't know how many times I've seen a newly planted landscape, and a month later, several of them have died because they haven't been watered. Although, and also though, I tell people you're doing good if you have 80% survival in your landscapes, but you gotta make sure you water appropriately. And the other thing is you want to group plants according to your water needs. Gone are the days where you're just watering everything in your yard. You want to try and cluster things so your vegetables and annuals are in one area so they get the most water. And then again, moderate use ones, your fruit-bearing trees and shrubs. And then you might have some drought-tolerant areas. And you can go from irrigation systems low-tech to high-tech. The lowest tech is just having a water can or bucket. Or a hose with a watering wand. Or a sprinkler attached to a hose. Lots of different types of sprinklers. Or you can have an in-ground irrigation system. And then, lately, what I do is I have the timers that I just attach to a hose in the summertime. And then I can program those and decide how much time I want to have things watered. All right, so that's kind of just the basic botany, basic horticultural kind of things. Now kind of going into some of the more sustainable landscape design ideas. So there's xeriscaping. Remember I talked about how we have dry winters. This map here kind of shows dry summers. This map here shows the areas of the world that has those winter rain. We've got the Pacific states, the Mediterranean region, and then the Australia, Tasmania, and a small area of Chile there. So when you're doing xeriscaping or dry gardening, you want to look for plants with small leaves, waxy or furry leaves. So the small leaves and waxy, furry or gray leaves are not as likely to dry out or with drying wind and things. Many bulbs and ornamental grasses, most bulbs, that's their strategy, is to just go dormant during dry periods. So a lot of bulbs just go dormant in the dry summer. So we have a lot of California and Oregon natives, and at the nursery that I work at, we specialize in native plants of the Pacific Northwest, but I'm always telling people, well, we dip down into California and Oregon, and also maybe up in BC and Alaska. So, and some people talk about assisted migration with climate change. Well, maybe we want to be planting more of those California and Oregon natives. So like sequoia and incense cedar, the Oregon myrtle, although that one's hard to get a hold of, and several of these others, the different kinds of oaks and ceanothus and manzanitas are so popular, as well as the garrya. The Mediterranean natives, you've got true cedars, strawberry trees. Strawberry tree is related to madrones. Heaths and junipers and all sorts of different herbs. Then there's your Chilean natives. And although the Australian ones are not likely to be hardy here. Rain gardens, it seems like rain gardens, they were so popular for several years, and now they're kind of going down. We're not selling as many of the rain gardens plants at the nursery. I know one time when I was walking along with my brother, and I'm like, oh, look, a rain garden. And he goes, oh, that's just swale. So why have a rain garden? Rain garden is basically a design to help filter pollutants and reduce the amount of water that's going into our storm drains. And to reduce damage caused by flooding, which we saw a lot of that this year, a lot of flooding up north. And then also to help restore habitat, attract wildlife, and frogs and birds. So, so that's another garden design. Oops, picking on the wrong thing. There we go. Should do those arrows. So living room. So she was talking about a living room. I did this living room on a cabin on our property years ago. My husband helped me. We mixed up the soil. So it only had about 3 inches of soil. You know, it was kind of a mix of pumice and perlite and compost. And I was thinking about trying to go up there and get a picture today, but it you know, this time of year it doesn't look that great. But again, it's progressed through the years as well. I still have a lot of some bulbs up there, and like Clarkia. Oh, actually, the Colomia grows every year as well, and a lot of the sedums, and then other things have colonized on their own. I've got licorice fern growing up there down, and several other things. And then also, if you're more in urban areas, you can do container gardens. And container gardens can add a lot to commercial areas. And then landscape design for home energy conservation. So a well-designed home admits low-angle winter sun and provides some sunshade in the summer sun. So if you got to think about when you're designing, you know, in the wintertime your sun's going to be just low in the sky, and in the summertime it's going to be higher up. This is a picture of a greenhouse, although it's been dismantled. We haven't put it back together lately, but we had it designed so the angle of the glass was exactly perpendicular to the angle of the sun at the equinox. And then, and during that time period, this was on our south side of our house, we would open the doors and it would heat our house. So that was it was a good supplement to our heating in our house. So, and also when we first moved on, we built our house 30-something years ago. And we used to always have to, in the summertime, close our drapes, to prevent so much sun coming in. But now we've got trees growing up. And we don't even have to bother about closing the drapes anymore because the trees shade the house. So if you strategically plant trees on the southwest side of the house, that'll help shade you in the summer. You want deciduous trees. So then you'll still allow some of the sun coming in the winter time. And then, you can also do plantings to protect from winds. And I just put a note here for fire protection. That's kind of a newer type of thing you want to think about too, as far as, do you want to try and clear some of the shrubs around your house so that they're not going to add fuel to any fire. And then low maintenance designs. So years ago, like I said, I used to work for the Park District in Tacoma. I think my least favorite time of year was fall, when the leaf blowers were constantly blowing. I just hate noise, So I'd much rather use a rake, or now we have a lot of the electric or battery operated equipment that makes things much more peaceful. And one thing I like to impress upon people, if you're interested in planting for wildlife and for nature, you might need to change your aesthetic ideal. and give up some of your need for control. You know, we have friends that gotta have the perfect lawn, you know, monoculture lawn with nothing in it, and, you know, pick up all the seed heads and flowers and everything. Well, that's taken away food for the animals. So again, like I said, the only reason for a lawn to me is for a play area. You can plant ground covers or eco lawns, and even the small little lawns I have, you know, I started out with an eco lawn, but I threw crocuses in there. I've got yarrow and clover, and, you know, it's definitely not a monoculture. And the other thing I also like to say is remove problem plants. Any plants that you're having to spray, I feel like it's not worth it. Apples and roses. I gave up. I have apple trees, but I kind of gave up on them. You know, I got small, scabby, wormy apples. Maybe only good for cider. If I can, but this year I borrowed a cypress from my brother, and then by the time I got out there, something had eaten them all. So I don't know if it was the raccoons or what, but I mean, I have a wildlife camera in my backyard now, and the first time I got it, I'm like, ooh, raccoons. I had so many raccoons, they were hanging off my bird feeder. That's why I was going through so much bird seed all the time. I've since changed it so they can't climb on my bird feeder anymore. Also, I plant easy care plants, native plants. Are usually fairly easy. Avoid plants that will grow too big for their spot and hedges which will need to be sheared. That's one thing people, oh yeah, this looks pretty, but they don't think about how big something is going to get. So, you know, you got to think about landscapes are dynamic. They change through time. Pull weeds before they go to seed. You know, that's constant battle at the nursery, always. Weeding, and, you know, it's never ending. And group high maintenance plants, your annuals and vegetables. And see these pictures, this is, well, this was actually, whoops. This was actually my mother-in-law's yard at one time, although they've taken out a lot of that connect, haven't they? And then this is actually my front yard. You know, again, pretty messy, but it's natural. Oh yeah, this tree here is a lot bigger now. This is actually a Japanese maple. Years ago I worked at Twin Lakes Golf Course in Federal Way, and I picked up this little tiny seedling, and that's that tree now, and now it's huge, big tree. So it's amazing how much things can grow in 25, 30 years. So habitats for people and wildlife, balancing basic needs. So what does wildlife need? They need the same things we need. They need food, they need water, they need cover, they need places to raise young. And at one point in my life, I had gotten a teacher certificate, and we learned a lot of this in my teaching. Here's my arrow, there it goes. We learned about this for teaching, you know, that before kids can learn, they have to have certain needs met, you know, their physiological needs, their safety needs, love and belonging and esteem, and so on. So we need a little bit more than a lot of wildlife do. Also, I also show here that like National Wildlife Federation and the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife have backyard wildlife programs where you can certify your landscape. I actually finally did the fish and wildlife one a couple of years ago. So you can it's really easy to do. You just say, well, what native plants you have provide water, you provide, you know, have all these plants for food or whatever, and you can get your backyard wildlife certified. And then permaculture. Permaculture is a contraction of permanent agriculture. So we want to provide habitat for wildlife, but then we're here too. So you may want to have an area where you have food plants for yourself. I actually have reduced my amount of gardens that I do at home now. I mean, I turned 65 this last year, and so I'm starting to cut back on a lot of the things that I used to do. I used to have chickens, I used to do these gardens, but I don't have these garden beds anymore. But, you know, my son's getting to that point where he wants to do a lot of this stuff. So these are some things that you want to think about, you know, what kinds of things you can grow and companion planting. If you want to have chickens or worms or other backyard animals, and different functions. And food for people, and I just talked about food for us. My favorite plants, I had this Hollywood plum. It produced every other year, bumper crop, every other year, although the last few years it hasn't so much. But I have planted a new one, and so the plums are easy. The Asian pears are pretty easy. This is the first year I got a pretty good crop of my Asian pears. Blueberries, my dad was a master gardener, and when they moved, we dug up 2 of his blueberries. That was over 35 years ago, and they're still producing every year. So rhubarb, chives, and so there's a lot of plants that are easy to grow that you can use to supplement. All right, food for wildlife. So this is one of the things I always like to say. The reason for a fruit. What is the reason for a fruit?
Seeds.
What?
Seeds.
Yeah, it's for food. Yeah, so the reason a plant produces a fruit is for them to attract an animal to spread their seeds around. So that's the reason. So native plants with high wildlife value, pines, the pine seeds are very valuable. Oaks, in our area, pines. In most other areas of the country, oaks are the most highest value, wildlife value. And another thing to think about with things like oaks, you'll notice that some years they'll have tons of acorn. One year they'll have tons of acorns. The next year they won't. Well, that's kind of a strategy that they use, because if they always have so many acorns, the squirrels would eat them up and overpopulate, right? So they purposely, like every other year, so they kind of keep the squirrel populations down a little bit. So elderberries, we have both blue and red elderberries. And actually poison oak is native. It actually has a berry that's very high in wildlife value. Any of the brambles, the blackberries, the salmon berries, and thimbleberries, any of those type of druplet bramble flowers or berries. Salal, huckleberries, manzanita, madrone, those are all kind of in the same family. Cascaras, cherry, dogwood. You know, when I first moved on our property, we had a big dogwood tree out front, and I see the flickers and other woodpeckers on those dogwood berries all the time. Cedar, Douglas fir, spruce. Have you ever gone hiking and see like just a pile of cone scales on the ground? Yeah, so the Douglas squirrel's been there busy. That's one of their favorite food. Serviceberry, gooseberry, snowberry, and even alder, birch, and aspen are very popular with a lot of the birds. So there's the Gary oaks, the thimbleberry, and huckleberry. And so what's the reason for a flower? To attract a pollinator. You know, or at least a showy flower, right? I mean, wind-pollinated plants, you know, like grasses and willows are kind of transition, but wind-pollinated plants, alders, you know, we've seen that after when the alders release their spore, or their pollen. And it gets all over everywhere. But big showy flowers, they need a pollinator. Hummingbirds like red tubular flowers, like red flowering currant and scarlet gilia, and they don't need a landing platform. They'll just hover and suck from those flowers with their long tongue. Butterflies and moths, they do need kind of a place to land, and they like orange scented tubular flowers, like so asters, that's sedum, pearly everlasting, snowbrush ceanothus. I don't know how many times I've seen this butterfly oops, there we go. Butterfly on pearly everlasting. I see it all the time. Bees. So bees, like scented blue, violet, ultraviolet, sometimes, so this is like a Clarkia, see, it guides them in there. They've got this coloration pattern that guides the bees right into the center. Like the lupin here, like bumblebees actually have to crawl inside those flowers to get to the pollen. And then you got the like skunk cabbage and stinky flowers, like usually pollinated by flies or beetles, like the ginger, the wild ginger. You don't usually see the flowers of wild ginger because they're underneath the leaves, but they're pollinated by little gnats and things. So I talked about water. We need water for wildlife. So you can provide bird baths or fountains or ponds or other water features. So this, I keep losing there we go. This is a little fairy fountain that I have in my front property. I've had it for years. It doesn't look all that nice, and my mom would always go, "Oh, you gotta clean that out." And I'm like, "Well, Mom, I got tadpoles, and sometimes there's salamanders in there. I don't want to clean it out." So, I do clean it out every once in a while. I actually haven't had any salamanders or tadpoles lately. In fact, I'm kind of disappointed, and I showed you that picture earlier of my frog pond. I haven't even heard the frogs much in the last few years, so I'm a little discouraged there. And then a project that I had for this last year, my husband helped me with, is I made a bog garden. Where's my arrow keeps, there we go. It's different on my screen than on this screen. So we made this bog garden. So there's a little whiskey barrel buried in there, and underneath we did a pond liner and filled it up with sand and peat moss. Because my goal is I wanted to try and grow some of the native carnivorous plants. There are a few native carnivorous plants, but they're expensive. So I did buy a couple. The Darlingtonia is more native down to Oregon and California, and they're still alive. They're still growing in there. I don't know that you can actually see them in that picture. And there's the butterwort and the sundew, and I'm not sure whether those are still alive that I had. But this was this summer, so we had the 3 different kinds of monkey flowers, the scarlet monkey flower, the yellow monkey flower, and the pink monkey flower. That made it really pretty. And then you could also, if you wanted to encourage wildlife, you could put up bird houses or bat houses. Looks like he's got some here for a later talk. Then there's just natural spots. You gotta have natural spots for plants or animals to put nests. You could do mason bee nest boxes. And so, I have other talks that I do that talks more about specific native plants, but I didn't have a whole lot of time for this one. But why do you want to landscape with native plants? Native plants are better adapted to soils and climate. They usually require less irrigation, less maintenance, and they attract native wildlife and improve the natural ecology of an area. And this is I think this is important to me, is that native plants fit better aesthetically in local landscapes than many exotics. Sometimes I kind of roll my eyes when I see palms or other things that just don't seem to fit here, unless they have that style of architecture. And another thing is, and say people are gone, a natural landscape can be left alone to regenerate itself through natural systems: pollination, seed dispersal, and germination. So native plants are eco-friendly. More natural versus manicured. And this is one thing I always try and teach, is changing our aesthetic ideals. That's another thing I get at the nursery a lot of times. Sometimes we have people that have to come to our nursery because they're required to plant native plants. Maybe they did something along their shoreline or cleared something out they weren't supposed to, so they're required to come and get native plants. But then, some of these people are really picky. Like, oh no, a little bit of spot on a leaf there, or a little, some insect's been nibbling on that leaf or something. And, you just can't be that picky. You got to kind of change your aesthetic ideals. So a landscape with high diversity provides food, cover, and nesting sites where there's more seeds and berries. If you were a bird, where would you prefer to live? Versus low diversity with chemical pesticides and fertilizers that are toxic. And what are their different impacts on watershed too? We talked about that, like rain gardens. So what's going to happen to all, rain goes into that lawn, what's going to happen to that rain? Where is it going to go? So that's kind of the goal for our kids and grandkids and many generations to follow. Let's try and live with nature for greener, sustainable, and more natural landscapes and gardens. Let some moss grow. That's another thing with lawns. People are like always wanting to try and kill the moss in their lawn. Well, if you got moss in your lawn, you're probably trying to grow a lawn in the wrong place anyway. Because a lawn does not grow in shade very well. And even, it's not a big deal if you have a few weeds. Because actually a lot of birds and insects need to eat those things. And again, so finally, please visit my websites. I have 2 websites. I don't make any money off of any of these other than giving talks like this. I have my native plant encyclopedia, and I also have, along with the plants that I have listed there, I kind of lost steam. I got all the trees, shrubs, and some ferns on there, but I kind of lost steam and haven't continued. But I also have some plant selection guides there. If you want to go, I got different plant selection guides on things for hummingbirds and butterflies and bees, erosion controls, and a few others. Then also kind of more along this talk more my habitat horticulture. I used to write for the Gateway in Good Harbor, and I've written some blogs for Northwest magazine, or what is that magazine? The West Sound magazine blog, and some other that. So all my articles that I've written in the past are on that website. So I think that's it. Is there any questions? I'm sorry I don't have more to give. I didn't have a whole lot of time. Yes?
What you mentioned a screener. What's a good screener? Screening, a plant for screening?
Screener. Pacific wax myrtle is our best native plant for screening.
Pacific what?
Pacific wax myrtle, Myrica or Morella californica. It actually grows, it's kind of sporadic in the Puget Sound region, and it grows all the way up in, you see it more along the coast of Oregon. Sporadic in the Puget Sound, but my husband's seen it up on Vancouver Island as well. But it's actually nitrogen fixing. It can grow very fast. It's actually related to bayberry, so it has fragrant leaves too. Any other questions?
Did you guys sell that at your nursery?
We do,
Yeah.
although we sell out of it often. We have some now. We try and keep it in stock, but again, it's our best screening shrub, and people are always picking it up. You know, again, we do have Oregon grape as well, although it doesn't grow quite as fast, and it's prickly, but it's also very good.
More questions?
Any other questions?
Come on, guys, I know you have questions. Burning questions.
Yeah.
Well, if you do have moss in your lawn through the winter and it goes away pretty much in the summer, what can you do that isn't super toxic is it just a matter of helping improve the pH to be more?
Yeah, pH would make it, because moss likes it, more acid, so that's one thing. I mean, some people use iron to kill the moss, but yeah, those are the two main things. Or you can just kind of try and rake it out a little bit. Yeah.
So I have a tree that has moss growing under it, but there are also violets growing under the tree. And so I'm wondering, is there another plant that would thrive in place of moss loves, but would still leave a little room for the violets?
Yeah, I'm sure that there's a lot. So it's shady, right? So
Yes, it's
we do have a lot of shade plants for. Is it moist at all, or is it more dry? Well, with moss, you think it would be moist.
Yeah.
So I mean, well, of course, you don't want things too aggressive. I was thinking of oxalis; that can be pretty aggressive.
Very.
And you know, of course, and then the fringe cup is nice. That can be kind of aggressive too.
What about kinnikinnick?
Kinnikinnick is better for sun. Yeah. There's like a lot of there's the wood strawberry. Wood strawberry is really nice. That'll spread. So there's if you come to the nursery, I have a whole section of perennial plants for shade. Again, like I said, not as many for sun, but there was another question. Yeah.
This is actually an answer. I live in a kind of a circular little forest habitat. I only get 4 hours of sustained sun in the middle of summer. My whole lawn is all different kinds of mosses. What you all need to remember about mosses is that they actually absorb CO2 4 times past the rate of anything else out there. So they're wonderful CO2 dumps.
Yeah.
And I also have all kinds of little tiny things coming up in it. And come summer, a lot of the moss dies back. And so I have this interesting garden where there's some little patches of grass coming up, and then some nice big, like cow, it looks like a Holstein cow. Part of it's brown and part of it's green. And it's like, my feeling is, if you live up here and you want to get rid of moss, don't live up here. Moss loves it.
Yeah, and if you want to encourage more moss, there are recipes online where you can put the moss in a blender with some buttermilk or something and spread it around too. And then you can also get like licorice fern growing in it as well, in the moss.
And mushrooms.
Oh, yeah, mushrooms. Yeah, well, you got to have whatever the mushrooms, the mycelium are eating under that. Another thing, go ahead.
I was going to ask if you could talk a little bit more about your bog projects.
My what project?
Your bog.
My bog project. Well, yeah. So I did this my husband helped me do this last year. We dug a big hole. How deep was it? About 4 feet deep?
No, it's 3 feet deep,
3
10
feet.
foot diameter.
How much?
10-foot diameter.
3 feet deep, 10-foot diameter. We got a pond liner. Initially, I just cut up this old vinyl kayak, but he didn't like that. He went ahead and bought the pond liner and mixed up sand and peat moss and filled that up. And we put a whiskey barrel in the center. And then, then I just planted a lot of different plants, the monkey flowers, some different sedges, and brushed some bog plants, and then again I wanted those carnivorous plants. And so this is the first year of it, so it's interesting to see how it will develop and what will take over. That's always like, oh no, is this, I was trying not to get anything that's going to be too aggressive that would take over everything, but that's always the challenge. But again, landscapes are dynamic. They change through time. And it's interesting, my backyard, I kind of did like a fairy garden. I don't think I had a picture of that. But for the longest time, we have a cedar tree in back, and the branches were getting to the point where they were almost touching the house, where we couldn't hardly even walk in the backyard. So I got my husband to limb up the cedar tree, and I've enjoyed it so much more now with my bird feeders back there. And he got me the wildlife camera. Mostly I would see raccoons and stray cats. But occasionally I would see, the squirrels too. We get the Douglas squirrels and sometimes the gray squirrels. Bunny occasionally. I've seen coyotes a couple times. Deer rarely. We don't have the deer on our property all that often. I think most of them go to our neighbor's property. Our neighbor has an actual farm, so that's where the coyotes usually go. They go after the neighbor's wildlife, or chickens and stuff. Any other questions? Again, I work at Woodbrook Native Plant Nursery in Gig Harbor. So we specialize in native plants of the Pacific Northwest. And you're welcome to come. We're open Tuesday through Saturday, 10 to 4. And we kind of bill ourselves as having one of the largest selections of native plants. That said, that unfortunately a lot of our suppliers have retired. So we're having a harder and harder time finding some, especially some more than usual huckleberries and more unusual, some of the perennials and things, but there are some new people coming up, just still trying to develop their production, what they can grow and be available to sell. But if you're interested in anything in particular, you can check our website. I've got a couple cards over there that has the Woodbrook Nursery on it there. You can pick up one of those. Check out the website. That shows exactly what we have. One caution is, just because it's on there doesn't mean we have it. You need to look at the quantity numbers available. And if the quantity numbers are low, it's always good to call, because who knows, something may have died or somebody may have bought the last one or two. Because I get that all the time. Well, your website said you had some. Did you make sure it didn't say 0? Because the website is not easy to just say sold out or anything, So there's a lot of zeros on what we have and what we don't have. But anyway,
Thank you. How many people in here grow native plants in your yard? Everybody, practically. How many want to grow more? Okay, we're going to take a very quick break. You can grab something to drink and a snack if you want, but we're going to start right away by introducing Tom Doty. And many of you know Tom. He's our amphibian expert here at KEC, and he's taught many of us the importance of amphibian ecology in our local ecosystems. And here's Tom.
microphone, I got asked by my fellow faculty members to please move down the hall, move your class down the hall, because they didn't like how loud it was. All right, I'm here, as Marion has suggested, for the frogs and the salamanders and what's happening to them, not only in Kitsap County, but across the country. This is the arborwood devastation on the east side of North Kitsap Heritage Park. Obvious loss of habitat, obvious catastrophic decline in wildlife in these areas. No terrestrial form of wildlife less than a pound survived that activity. Amphibians and small mammals in particular were devastated by that project. Everything else was dehomed and is now showing up in the yards and development around that area. We complained, the stewards of North Kitsap Heritage Park complained because that devastation led to siltation of Beaver Creek and Beaver Pond in North Kitsap Heritage Park. They issued, the commissioners issued a stop work order while they rebuilt their silt pond and reduced to some degree the silting of getting into the park. Well, I'm here to talk about pond building in an effort to save the amphibians, which are in global decline. We've lost 2,400 out of 5,700 species globally. That's almost half the amphibians on the planet are already gone. Now, I'm here to talk about pond building in an effort to reverse that trend. The literature supports pond building as a method for regenerating amphibian populations. We've seen this everywhere from Switzerland to Missouri. The building of ponds enables amphibian populations to persist. One of the problems locally when you try to argue for the preservation of amphibians in light of what's going on in Kitsap County is the response by developers is, well, that salamander is not listed, that frog is not listed. And you may know that they only list an animal as endangered when there are about 10 left. That flies in the face of the genetics of this issue, which means that you've reduced the population so small the genetic variability is not there, and there is an increased chance that they're going to disappear entirely. Well, first question, if you're talking about building ponds, is it legal? I can't answer that question. I've been invited to see and have seen about a half a dozen ponds built by citizens in North Kitsap County. Not one of them has asked for a permit, but I don't want to tell you to go out and dig a pond without consulting the relevant authorities. If you live in a neighborhood and have neighbors who are into this as well, then you can have a cooperative effort at building ponds. In addition to legal, where on your property do you want to build ponds? Natural swales, low areas, opportunistic depressions, the side of your driveway. They don't have to be very big. A pond the size of this table will support an amphibian several amphibian populations, salamanders and frogs included. All right, next slide, please. The devastation at Arborwood was not limited to what you just saw. This is a silt fence required by construction regulations hereabouts. It's a plastic fence set in the ground to prevent muddy water from getting to the other side of the fence. In this case, this fence, a couple hundred yards long, was not in the area you just saw. It was several hundred yards away to protect North Kitsap Heritage Park after all the stewards had complained about the siltation issue. And so their response was to put this fence in. This was a disaster and is emblematic of the problems facing amphibians. No amphibian, this is a rough-skinned newt, named obviously for the nature of its skin. In 2018, a few years back, these animals, these amphibians, were obstructed in their migratory journey, trying to get to their breeding ponds. The word got out. The good citizens of Kingston coordinated an effort to save these animals. Some 500 salamanders and frogs were found stranded on the sides of this, on the bad side of this fence, trying to get to their reproductive areas. About half of them died. I'm not going to show you the photographs, but disarticulated frogs with the eggs that they spent a year developing scattered on the ground because they couldn't get by this fence and predators attacked them. Happily, about half of them were picked up by a group of citizens who were concerned and came to the park, came to this area, and lifted them over the fence. We can't do that every year. There are better ways to do this. We used to use straw bales as silt protection. We don't do that anymore. Next slide, please. There were about I guess I said there's about 500 that were affected. Where do salamanders and frogs breed normally? Forested ponds. This is what we call an ephemeral pond. It's there only in the wet portion of the year. You can see the trees growing out of it. This is a forest that happens to have a depression that fills with water that lasts for a long enough time for salamanders and frogs to reproduce. There's one exception, by the way. There is another salamander that looks like that newt that is the same color but has a smooth skin. That's not a pond dweller. So I have left that out of the story here. Next slide. Natural ponds attractive to amphibians include beaver ponds. This is obviously a beaver chew, and you can see the pond beyond it. Not a very good photograph, but it illustrates the fact that it is these ephemeral ponds, temporary ponds, intermittent ponds, they're sometimes called. Amphibians don't do well reproducing in ponds that contain fish because their larvae have no protection. The tadpoles and salamander larvae cannot withstand the predation pressure of fishes, so fishless areas are best for them. Next slide. Another sort of, there are natural ponds and then there are constructed ponds. There are constructed ponds that are inadvertent. This is a typical inadvertent man-made pond. That's a tire track. On Beaver Ridge Trail, if you've been to North Kitsap Heritage Park, you may have gone up Beaver Ridge Trail. Up at the top there's a curve, and on the inside of the curve, the haul trucks that habitually hauled wood out of there created this pond. I found it a long time ago, investigated it, counted about 50 salamander larvae growing in a 30-foot long, 6-inch deep, 2-foot wide pond. This is not very big, but it served those salamanders well. Next slide. I went back the next year to see who returned to this pond to reproduce, presumably the larvae that had metamorphosed and gone out and spent the year in the woods, and then go back to the only pond they ever knew, which was this one. A concerned citizen, worried about the flooding of the trail, had dug a trench across the trail and drained that pond. So that whole group of salamanders that came out the year I saw it have no pond to go back to. If you're 7 inches long, it's hard to find a pond in the woods. The natural, evolutionarily derived tactic is to go back to the pond to produce chew. If it's not there, then that genetic strain is gone. Next slide. We also build ponds for stormwater control. This is obviously number 509 and 510 on the east side of North Kitsap Heritage Park. These kinds of ponds, this is a disaster in the making for amphibians. They're referred to in the ecological literature as ecological traps, meaning they induce salamanders and frogs to enter these ponds. They don't have any problem with the fence, to enter these ponds for reproductive purposes. The problem is that these ponds are designed for infiltration. They want the water, the folks who designed them, they want the water to contribute to the groundwater. And so it's designed in a way that causes infiltration, not retention. What happens is hundreds, and I have photographs of this as well, hundreds of frogs and salamanders entered this pond deposited, reproduced, bred, and deposited eggs, and then the pond dries before the eggs can hatch or before the larvae can metamorphose. Again, I have some real unpleasant pictures of hundreds of glistening frog eggs laying in the sun in this drying pond. There are better ways to do this. I've tried to bring this point to the county with mixed results. Next slide. This is a better way to design a flood control pond. Some of you may be familiar with these ponds. They're on Barber Cutoff, fairly near the elementary school out there. Natural slopes, emergent vegetation, natural bottom, forested around the edges, an attractive place for amphibians to breed, and that water lasts long enough. Next slide. This is Abby Emenegger from the United States Geological Survey. She and I seined this pond just to see what was in it. She has a purpose in doing this. Among others, we found green frogs. Now, those of you who are concerned about invasives, relax. Green frogs are here. They're going to stay here. There's nothing we can do about it. And I'm going to suggest to you that we may ultimately come to admire these frogs. In any event, the Geologic Survey is doing a study of amphibian diseases. And the Geologic Survey actually hires biologists. You don't have to be a geologist. But in any event, her interest was in capturing green frog larvae to study for diseases. Next slide. A view of another one of the series of ponds on Barber Cutoff. You can see the drainage pipe up here on the right leading to the next pond. Next slide. There's also a possibility for, I'm on the wrong page here. There's also a possibility of regenerating, restoring ponds, restoring wetlands that used to be there. North Kitsap Heritage Park stewards conceived of the idea, did almost all of the work of constructing this ponded area. We took out a haul road, you can see it on the far side, an old timber haul road. We took out the haul road and reconfigured the land so that the water, which was flowing underground through long abandoned culverts, would rise to the surface again. It wouldn't be drained away. We've already seen amphibians breeding in these ponds. A lot of work by a dedicated group of people, and we were all fired shortly following this restoration. All right, what I really want to get to here are the private constructed ponds, which I have seen all over North Kitsap. I've been invited and have visited about a half a dozen of them. Next slide, please. These were my first field research assistants. This is my daughter Robin and my son Josh. I have two generations of children, two born in the 60s, two born in the 90s. These were the two born in the 60s. I was going to graduate school when they were young, and they helped out in my field research. This is a pond in which we studied amphibian population dynamics. Robin in particular developed a love of and an appreciation for the decline in amphibians, and so when she became an adult, she embraced saving amphibians in a real big way, as I'll show you. Next slide. Robin and her then husband were living in Orlando, Florida. They were concrete contractors. They made some money. We decided to get everybody in the family back together. A few of us were already in Kitsap County, and everybody else came and moved out here. They moved out here and bought 20 acres in Kingston, and among other things, built a home, built ponds, and raised two daughters, which I'll talk about in a moment. You see in the distance here a borrow pit, typical of construction practices hereabout. I'm standing where the house is going to be built. This is downhill toward that borrow pit, and so the drainage is downhill. They took advantage of that and the rain that landed on the roof, the gutters, all of that fed into this drainage area down toward this borrow pit. Next slide. You can see the initial dirt moving. It's the same area. By the way, keep your eye on this tree over here to the left. This tree reappears. It was in the previous slide, and it will reappear several times. Here's the borrow pit, relatively small originally. You can see they've built up the berm, have put in other berms, and we now have a circuitous route by which the water gets there. Riffles and runs. If you're going to build a pond, riffles and runs. Riffles to have some moving water, and pools to collect the water to let it pool, literally. Next slide. To add habitat variability and visual interest, they aligned a lot of it with local rocks, also some wood in the area in order to again create habitat variability, different kinds of habitats for different sorts of organisms. Her goal was not just to attract amphibians, it was to attract all of the invertebrates that use these ponds as well. Pollinators, significant visitors to these kinds of ponds. The big pond, the main pond, this curves around like this. In the main pond, you can see a little bit over here, and most of it is to the left of this evergreen. Next slide. Sorry if I tried to get somebody. This is about a year later. Same view, about a year later. You can see it is readily filled with water. A small amount of grass has been planted around just to stabilize the soil to prevent the siltation of this pond. It has actually worked quite well. These intermediate ponds and the main pond were lined with a substance called bentonite. It's a clay mineral, non-toxic to wildlife, non-toxic to your pets, non-toxic to your kid if he wants to swim in it. But it seals the bottom. It's a clay mineral that seals the bottom. You don't have to line it with plastic. You don't have to worry about the fact that we have sandy soils around here. The object is to retain the water, and so you got to seal the bottom somehow. And in this case, it was bentonite. Next, please. Flip the other way. Yeah, there we go. There was a small cabin on the property. Their house was built upstream, up to the left in this photograph. But you can see the size of this pond. Here's a rope swing. Their daughters were able to swing on that rope swing and swim in this pond. 4 feet deep, sloped banks, about 30 by 40 feet. So it's a fairly good sized pond. It didn't need to be that big, but it is that big and it works very well. Next slide. Here's this same tree, quite a bit bigger than it used to be. And here is the original borrow pit. This is a locust limb. This will factor in here in a moment. This is a locust tree that fell across it. Where I come from, if you're raising fish in a pond, you don't let trees fall in it. You don't let wood sit in it. There are all sorts of reasons for that. But it's not appropriate if you want to have real wildlife, terrestrial wildlife, come and visit your pond. Next slide. One of the values of building a pond is educational. I pointed out that I have 2 granddaughters living here, living here. And one of them was in a science class in, I think it was junior high school. And we decided to construct, she was interested in amphibians. Everybody in my family has been beat into submission in terms of amphibians. But in any event, Rachel and I, my granddaughter, and I just used whatever we could find to construct a drift fence with drop traps. These white cans here are drop traps. You can see there's one on the outside and one on the inside. One on the outside and there's another one on the inside. The purpose of this fence is to interrupt the migratory journey, just like the silt fence did, only in this case we have these drop traps. An amphibian trying to get to the pond encounters this obstruction, and like any obstruction, a rock, a tree, a fallen log, they walk around it to get to, they know where they're going. And in this case, they fall in the cans. Granddaughter comes out in the morning, identifies, counts, and notes the time. She's not trying to count how many breed in the pond. She's trying to determine the timing of the arrival of the adults and ultimately the exit of the juveniles that result. This study and some other things she did got her into Huxley College of the Environment, and she's a rabid environmentalist. If you, one of the real treasures, one of the real rewards of building this kind of pond and ultimately getting to see them are the critters that come to the pond. The harbingers, the real harbingers of spring. It's not birds, it's amphibians that are the real harbingers of spring. This is the red-legged frog. You can see the red beneath its thighs right here. This is the one you hear in the early spring. Rah, rah. A low-pitched, not very loud call. Next slide. This is another common frog we have in the area. Referred to as the Northwest Pacific tree. It's a tree frog, sometimes referred to as chorus frogs because of their ability to make a lot of noise. This is the loud frog. This is the one that Hollywood has recorded in order to have creepy jungle sounds in their horror movies. Loud frog, characteristically identified by the expanded toe clips. This is a tree frog. That implies that it climbs. It can climb up your windows. And everybody assumed that those were little suction cups on the feet. Very recent research has shown that they produce a short-lived adhesive. Very much of interest in the world of industrial development of adhesives. This is a short-lived adhesive that the frog can turn on or turn off, depending on what it's doing. It's an amazing animal. Next slide. This is our big salamander, Dana Bressette. It's about 7, when I refer to a 7-inch animal, this is one of those 7-inch animals. All brown, it's hard to see it in this photograph, but has a built-in eternal smile. It makes you grin when you look into the face of one of these. The Northwest salamander. Next. This is its cousin. By the way, both of these, the previous one and this one, is the long-toed salamander. Both of these are referred to as mole salamanders. That's an informal name. But they're referred to as mole salamanders because they use the burrows. They live in the burrows of small mammals and the like. You want to find them? Lift up a tree trunk. They're quite often hidden away very, very well. This is the long-toed salamander, and again, you can't see it, but it has an especially long toe on each hind foot. You can tell it from the previous one, however, because of this yellow or tan dorsal stripe. Very interesting, very beautiful animal. Next. This is the one you've already seen, the rough-spotted newt, rough-skinned newt. Newts are a wonderful animal. These are toxic to predators. If a predator eats this animal, it won't eat another one. Not because it harms it, but it's an unpleasant experience. There's a wonderful piece of film out of the late 50s, early 60s of a blue jay having just eaten a small salamander sitting on a limb, puking its guts out. It's actually a very funny piece of film, but it illustrates the point that that bluebird never again ate a salamander. One of the results of this is that these are very bold animals. I hesitate in polite company to call them ballsy, but that's what they are. They will walk across your lawn. They know they're toxic. They're not going to be bothered by the predators, and so they'll walk your lawn in the middle of the day. Next. If you get real, hit it again. If you get real lucky, the local bald eagle will come and take a bath in your constructed pond. In this case, in the shallow part of the pond, on that locust limb I pointed out earlier. Watch this bird. This is a cell phone telephoto video, so it's not real good, but it illustrates the point. There he goes. Sitting there so you can adore him. Last slide. Thank you for you guys. Build a pond. Go home and build a pond. They don't have to be that
Wait.
big. Go ahead.
I have 2 clawfoot bathtubs in my backyard that I've turned into ponds.
Yep.
And I have red-legged frogs that are coming regularly.
Excellent.
And I got a glob of the northwestern salamander eggs, and they hatched out in there last year. And at least 3
All right.
of them have overwintered. They're about like that
Yep.
now. And I'm just wanting to create more life for them there. And I'm wondering, in such a small area, what kind of things can I add that will be really beneficial for them? I've got gobs of birds coming and taking baths there, and the squirrels take baths
Yeah.
there, and a bear came and drank out of there last year. But those bathtub ponds are great because I'm old, and they're at a level that I can get down to.
I'm the oldest person in this room, and I'll guarantee you that what you're doing is the right thing. I grew up in the Midwest, and seeing salamander larvae and frog tadpoles in horse troughs is a very common thing. They will use any good body of water. That pond that you saw my son and daughter standing next to, we kept larvae in that pond in order to introduce them into the cages that we were loading at that point in time. I've had bullfrogs adopt the horse trough, sitting on the edge, yelling like crazy, looking for a female bullfrog. They will reproduce in any body of water that lasts long enough. That's the crucial issue. Is it going to be there when their larvae need to metamorphose into juvenile frogs and leave the pond? Almost anything that you fill with water outdoors of some reasonable size, as you point out, will attract amphibians. The coolest part about building ponds is that you build it and they will come. Apologies to the movie by the...
I have a concern
The baseball,
about
yes.
the pond the tub that's holding the salamander Fs or whatever they are. When they get big enough and leave, the pond is right against like a wooden deck. There's steps up the deck, but I'm concerned. I mean, do I need to make some ramps off of that bathtub?
Put an attractive stick in there.
Yeah. Okay.
Baseball bat diameter stick. They'll find their way to that and exit. Keep it full.
Well, exit is not what I'm worried about. It's how do they get back into it if they want to come back and mate in that pond?
Do the same thing. Craft some rocks, some sticks, whatever you can find to create sort of a gentle slope up to the pond. I can't tell you how they know the water is in there when they can't see it, but I'll guarantee you that they know. I've seen too many times what looks like an impossible place for a frog or a salamander to get, and they're full of eggs, full of larvae, and ultimately produce juveniles.
So around here, at what time like right now, are the red-legged frogs gonna start laying eggs, and are the salamanders and the little guys?
This is a complicated question to answer because of global warming. You all been here probably long enough to see. The first time I lived out here was in '76. It rained all the time. The Chilly Hilly 100, you rode in the rain. When the danger of frost is gone, then they're going to emerge. They can't deal with frost, but they're very good at weather, at thinking about weather, and they will come. I would start looking normally here I start looking for frogs and salamanders, listening for frogs. Salamanders, of course, are quiet. But listening for frogs in early March, late February, early March. I mean, we're getting right to it right now, and you've all seen how beautiful the weather is. A little bit of rain, and you're going to start hearing frogs. I've heard from some people they've already heard frogs calling this year.
Yeah, it's above 40 degrees. When it's above 40 degrees.
Yeah, it's interesting.
There's a classic map problem.
Yep, well, listen, that pond that my son and daughter, my first generation of children were standing next to, our rule of thumb was when the water temperature reached 9 degrees C, early, mid-40s, then you could expect amphibians to be laying their eggs, yeah. It doesn't have to be real warm. Yes?
I do egg mass surveys in Kitsap County, and this is the earliest that we've ever found red-legged frogs in our retention pond. They were laying last week.
I believe that, yeah. You're not the first person I've heard that from. I've heard other people talking about it calling. If they're calling, the next day you're going to see eggs. And by the way, I don't have a photograph of it, but if you have a pond and you're wondering if the salamanders got there last night, look for spermatophores. On the bottom, on the leaf litter, will be what look like little tiny mushrooms, about a ½ inch tall, with a little white glob on top. Those two salamanders that you saw do a nuptial dance with their mates. Turns her on, turns him on. He deposits a spermatophore. She comes along and picks up the spermatophore. They have internal fertilization. You know, significant for an amphibian. Frogs don't do that. And internal fertilization, well, there are a couple. But internal fertilization, she then abandons him and goes and finds a spot where she wants to deposit the eggs. Not all amphibians do it that way. Usually it's a communal effort. A male frog will find a female frog before they get to the pond. The female is usually bigger because she's grabbing full of eggs. He'll grab onto her in what we call amplexus, and then she's got to haul his sorry ass all the way to the pond in order to fertilize the eggs as she is depositing them. There's all sorts of variants on this. I saw somebody
That's
over
another
here.
class.
Yes.
How long is long enough if I have a seasonal wetland in my back 40? How long do I need to, so if we have an early drought summer, for example?
That's a problem. That is a problem. Generally, July and August, they will start to emerge. The trigger for metamorphosis, the trigger to get those larvae to leave the pond is, A, the pond is getting warmer because it's getting shallower, and the food is running out. That triggers metamorphosis. So some years they'll come out as big juveniles, other years they'll come out as relatively tiny juveniles because the pond tended to dry early. That's a problem. If you have a pond, a constructed pond such as my daughter does, they supplement the water occasionally when it's really dry. There's nothing wrong with doing that.
Well, I want to thank you, Tom, for your passion.
Thank you all.
It's truly a fun experience. And CERT started their interest in native plants as a forager, I believe. He might tell you otherwise. They started their nursery to grow native plants that are not commonly grown by others in our region, with the idea of adding to the biodiversity that's missing from our gardens and landscapes. And it's called Nobody Nursery. And CERT's a wonderful source of knowledge, both in identification of native plants, as well as their availability as food. So welcome, CERT. Oops, no, that's the wrong one. Oh, here, you might need this.
Thank you. Okay, yeah, it's up there. So yeah, as Marion said, my name is Sir. People also call me Joe. It doesn't bother me one way or the other. I have come today prepared to talk about the relationships between our native plants and various Lepidoptera, moths and butterflies, their larvae, the caterpillars' relationships with plants. And I'm very much interested in the caterpillars themselves, because so much interest in the native plant world has been talking about pollinators, pollinators, pollinators. So people are planting flowers to provide some nectar for the butterflies, for the bees. But in reality, that is only the tip of the iceberg with butterflies and moths, because the vast majority of their time is spent as larvae, as caterpillars, feeding on mostly plants. And so when we are feeding nectar to the adults, we're just giving them a little bit of sugar water to keep them going while they're eating. So that's why I have come to talk about this. And one often cited observational study was put out, Doug Tallamy wrote about this, that a single pair of Carolina wrens, each one of those Carolina chickadees, each one of those weighs about the same amount as 2.5 pieces of paper. But in raising a single nest, they are bringing in for the chicks 350 to 570 caterpillars every day. And to raise that one nest, it takes 6,000 to 9,000 caterpillars for just that one nest. So if you think about all of those little songbirds that we see all over, that's a vast number of songbirds, which requires an even more vast number of caterpillars, which requires even more vast amount of foliage for them to feed on. And then the caterpillars, even more than the butterflies themselves, require a diversity of foliage. Because caterpillars tend to be very specialized, which many folks are very well aware of. And the driving force for them to specialize is the fact that plants don't want to be eaten. If a caterpillar eats a leaf, the energy that plant has put into that leaf is wasted in the plant's view. So they go to great lengths to prevent from being eaten. And the number one defense the plants have, because they can't run away, they can't fight back, is chemical warfare. They produce toxins that dissuade insects and even larger animals from eating them. A prime example that is very well known, of course, is monarchs of milkweed. Every sixth grader can tell you that monarchs only eat milkweed. In other parts of North America, there are a few other close relatives that they eat. But in the Northwest, the only genus, the only plants that monarchs can feed on is milkweed. And the reason for this is that milkweed is very difficult to eat. The three primary defenses that milkweed present are, you can see in this great photo, the plant material tends to be very heavily covered in little hairs. It varies by species. Doesn't look like much to us, but if you are a tiny insect trying to eat through those hairs, it is extremely difficult to do it, so you might just go off and eat slingers. Also, the sap, which is the namesake of milkweed, is very sticky. If you are a tiny insect and you get this in your mouth parts, you might not be able to eat anymore. If you get on your wings, you might not be able to get this off your wings. If you get it in your leg joints, it's going to be really hard to move around. If you get it in your respiratory system, you might not be able to breathe at all. So this sap, just being a little sticky, is a very formidable defense. And then also, chemically, milkweed is very toxic. It's perfectly safe to have in the landscape, but there are chemicals in this that if we were to consume it, it could very well stop our hearts. And very few animals are able to eat this. Whereas the monarch caterpillars have adapted to eat this. And the reason they eat something that's so difficult is because they don't have to share it. Nobody else is eating it. And as long as there are milkweed, the monarchs have all the food they can eat. But the flip side of this is that to be able to eat this, they have had to change their biology so extremely that they can no longer eat anything else. The only other member of this family that is in Washington is Apocynum, the dogbangs. and that it is not an acceptable host for monarchs. Occasionally, if they have nothing else to lay eggs on, they will lay eggs on those. And it was thought for a while that maybe it was an alternative host, but the larvae will not survive. The main reason for this project I've been working on on this topic is to help folks to decide how to use limited space, your gardens, your landscaping, to have the most effect, the most ecological benefit. So should we plant milkweed? Well, milkweed is not native to Western Washington, and therefore neither are monarchs. You cannot support monarchs in Western Washington by planting milkweed, because they're not here. Instead, milkweed is a plant that nobody can eat. Almost nothing can eat it here in Western Washington. The only thing it provides is nectar. It's just sugar water. So if you have limited space, you might as well plant something that caterpillars can't eat. What else did I have to say? Which is what brought me to this project that I'm going to speak about. I have been doing a very, very intensive data-heavy project of tracking all the known interactions between caterpillars and our native plants that I can find. When I got interested in this, I reached out to the Xerxes Society, and I asked them, well, hey, this is somebody must have made this list, so where is it? And they're like, nah, it doesn't exist. Which is exactly the kind of challenge that I need to get going. So I've spent, I don't know, it might be getting to the hundreds of hours by this point, creating a giant database. And this is just a tiny corner of it. You can see on the top a list of butterflies and moths, and down the side, various plants. And each one of these checks indicates a time that it has been observed that this caterpillar feeds on this plant. It doesn't mean that that's the only plant they feed on, but just that is one time that it has been known to do that. And here to zoom out, this is the entire database. It is about 750 moths and butterfly species wide, about 350 plants and groups of plants deep, and it represents about 1,500 known associations between butterflies and moths and our native plants as caterpillars. Which seems like a lot, but it really isn't. Because we have thousands of species of plants that are native to the Northwest. We have thousands of species of moths and butterflies that are native to the Northwest. And we know hardly anything. Hardly anything is known to science because it takes so much energy, so much expertise, so much resources to do this work that we are just scratching the surface. So I realized that we need to extrapolate a little bit. To know how to support the different species of caterpillars, we need to generalize a little bit. So I'm going to use the example, a personal example. I am allergic to apples. Can't eat them. It is a bad time. I am also allergic to pears. Not quite as bad, but it's pretty unpleasant. Service berry, it's pretty mild, my allergy. And all of those are in one little taxonomic group of the family tree. Cherries, a little bit more distant on the family tree of the rose family, no problem. On the far other side of the family, rose hips, strawberries, raspberries, I can eat them all day, no problem. So if I am faced with a fruit that is on this side of the family tree, I'm not the least bit worried. I don't know if I'm allergic to quince, but I'm not going to mess with it because it is in the same little group right there. So I have applied the same logic to our native plants and how they would be interacting with our native butterflies and moths. And so just for this presentation, I've taken a look at Artemisia. This is your mugworts, your sagebrush, your wormwood is another name. And it is an extremely diverse group, shockingly so. Two very charismatic examples. Probably everybody here would recognize, if not be very familiar with Artemisia suxdorfii, which is, you see this all over along the coast. It's very beautiful, has a green top of the leaf, white top of the leaf that is very striking when it waves in the wind. It dies back to the ground every year. It's a very leafy one. And then in eastern Washington, Artemisia tridentata, which is the big sagebrush, it is woody, it has evergreen leaves. Both of these are very, very fragrant, but have very different lifestyles and support their biological interactions in different ways. And then you have some other ones in the genus, like Artemisia campestris. It doesn't smell like much at all. You would not think that it was that closely related to these. And that indicates that there are some key differences in the terpenes and other aromatic fragrances, these toxins that these plants are putting out to try to not be eaten. And it happens that these traits group very well into this subgenus. So you got family is up top, genus, Artemisia, and then down at the very bottom you have all the species. And all the woody ones are in Tridentate. The ones that don't smell like much, but are very leafy, are in Dracunculus. That's also includes tarragon, is in that group. And then your coastal mugwort and other very leafy and very fragrant ones are in a subgenus that is also named Artemisia. And so I took this information and plugged it into this giant database to be able to extrapolate from this. And so here's another way of looking at these traits. Up at the top, you got the stinky stuff. At the bottom, you got the stuff that's not smelly at all. On the right side, we got the woody stuff. And on the left side, we have the leafy stuff. And this is where those subgenus, those subgroups, fit into each one of these. And so I've gone ahead and I have drawn generalizations that if you are a caterpillar that can eat Artemisia tilacei, you can probably eat Douglassiana. It has not been observed to happen, but that's because we know so little. So if you're trying to specifically support particular butterflies that are in your area, this is a way to make some assumptions and some generalizations and some best practices. So here you see in each of those groups, these are the mossum butterflies that are known to feed on species that is in each one of these quadrants. And so I've been able to take this, and this is an example of my signage at the nursery, pull out so that for every single sign on the back of it, I have the list of potential hosts. It does not mean that these are ones that are known to feed on the species, but there's a very good chance that if you plant this, any one of these caterpillars might be able to feed on it. And I'm working on rolling this out as I develop this project. It's still a work in progress. And so I've been talking about Artemisia, which makes you think probably, I must have a big sale on Artemisia right now, right? I don't have any in stock. It must mean that I'm here to tell you to go out and buy some and plant in your garden. Again, not necessarily. I'm right now focused on how to prioritize. If you have just like a limited garden, limited landscape, is this plant going to be a priority to put into your garden? Here are 4 species of Lepidoptera, moths and butterflies. Actually, these are all moths that are known to feed on this group, Artemisia. I picked the prettiest ones. Here on the right, we have 2 that feed on the subgenus, the group that are the woody, smelly ones. The hosts for these are only present in eastern Washington, so these moths are only in eastern Washington. This is not a group of plants that would be worth putting in your garden here if you are trying to prioritize the biological interactions and support the native wildlife. On the other side, you've got the wormwood pug all the way over there. You can see its caterpillar. That is present in western Washington on both sides of the Cascades. But it also, it'll eat the mugworts, it'll eat goldenrod, it'll eat yarrow. They have no shortage of things to eat. So you could support them, but they're not the ones who are the most in need. And then second from the left, there's this spotted sage moth, which their hosts, the host plant exists on both sides of the Cascades, but this moth has never been observed over here. And so it's a lot more rare than the other ones. So if you were in Eastern Washington, I would say, yeah, absolutely, plant Artemisia campestris. This is a wonderful thing to support. But here in Western Washington, you're not really doing anything for it because it's not here. So as I've been analyzing Artemisia for this presentation, I realized, you know, maybe this isn't the most, the highest priority group for your garden. They're beautiful, I love them, I have them in my garden because I have a lot of gardens. But you might want to look other directions to support these the caterpillars that are native to here, Kitsap County, and the peninsula. So some other options that are very high priority are grasses and sedges. Sedges, for those who aren't familiar, they look like grasses. You look at it, you think it's a grass. They're very close relatives, very similar biologically. And here are lists of the moths and butterflies that the caterpillars are known to feed on these families. Extremely long lists. The sedges are probably much longer lists than we see right here, but people pay more attention to grasses because we eat grasses. Wheat is a grass, corn is a grass, barley is a grass, so they gets a lot more attention. So if you plant a grass or a sedge in your garden, there's a very high chance that you can support our native caterpillars and moths. And I brought a couple species of sedges and grasses that are out on the table there. They're free, take some home, plant them. And here are a couple examples of butterflies that are supported by the plants that I brought. The martin skipper is a cute little thing that is very subtle. It flies very low to the ground. The adults like to feed on low plants like violets and silverweed and stuff like that. And they are really focused on bunch grasses and sedges. So I have over here one of the grasses that would be a very good source for them to eat. But you can see that in their distribution, they have been observed to be in the South Sound, and then kind of eastern end of the Cascades, south of 90. So if you happen to come up here from Thurston County, and you have a wet area, a kind of dampish meadow area, this would be a wonderful thing to plant. But since we saw that giant list of species that feed on grasses, you know that if you put this grass out here into your garden, somebody's going to be very grateful. You're going to make some caterpillar very happy. And here's another one. One of the common names for this is the sedge witch. They, as you would guess, feed on sedges. And the sedge that I brought that's out there on the table is Dolichium arundinaceum, also known as three-way sedge. It's a very weird looking sedge, kind of looks like bamboo a little bit. There is not record of this feeding directly on the three-way sedge, but as you can see, it feeds on multiple species within the sedge family, which indicates that they probably have enough variability to feed on the Dolichium. Additionally, the Dolichium spread by rhizomes, and this butterfly is known to feed on sedges that are both spreading by rhizomes and bunching. They're versatile in the shape of their host as well. So this is a wonderful thing to put in your garden. These do exist pretty widespread. They have been observed multiple times here in Kitsap County. So if you put this Dolichium in a wet spot in your garden or your landscaping, you're probably going to make the sedge witch very happy, which is why I brought it here today. And we are pretty limited on time. I know we're a little bit behind time. I do have a list of sources that I used for this, if you want to do further reading. iNaturalist is always fantastic. If you're not already playing with iNaturalist, get involved. It's really fun. And a fantastic book is Life Histories of Cascadia Butterflies. These two researchers raised pretty much every native butterfly in our region, from egg to flight, and they have amazing photographs. It's an unparalleled resource. I haven't read this yet, but it is in the mail. I'm going to receive it soon. I've heard amazing things about moths of Western North America, which is much, much cheaper if you buy it directly from Princeton University Press instead of something like Amazon. And then there's also a website, Pacific Northwest Moths, which is a little denser, a little harder to use, but it is it's another great resource. So in conclusion, the lessons that I bring from all of this is that flowers are only supporting the very last glimmer, the very last spark of life in the life of a butterfly or a moth. And in fact, if we really want to support them, we need a diversity of foliage, as many different types of native plant as you can have in your landscape. And while information that is available to science so far is limited, there are still best practices that we can extrapolate from what we already know. That's it. Any questions?
Come on.
Yeah.
The chart that you're using, is that like crowdsource assisted, or like how are you
The database?
getting people to help you do that, or are you?
It's just me.
What, but like when you're finding out which pollinators are going to which plants, that's just your research?
Oh, the question about which pollinators are going to which plants. I am going to these different sources, and I'm browsing through, and as I encounter the data and the various different sources, I am then inputting them one by one. So I'm not doing that research myself. I am not doing any field observations. Although sometimes if there's something I'm curious about, I might go onto iNaturalist and I'll look for photographs of this caterpillar of this species, and I'll go through all of the photographs to see what it has been on, so I can kind of get an idea of what it could be on.
Are you part of an organization or in contact with an organization that's paying people or looking for volunteers to collect data points on no lepidopterans?
Yeah, the question is if I'm involved in an organization that is coordinating people to collect data. I am not. I am just a weirdo with a bunch of cats. There are ways to get involved. You can reach out to the Xerxes Society. They're a fantastic organization that is focused on the study and preservation of the biodiversity of invertebrates. Xerxes, like King Xerxes, Xerces. You can reach out to them, but kind of like one of the great things you can do is to get involved on iNaturalist.
I already have 20,000 observations.
Oh, you do? Good. Okay. Yeah. So for everyone to get involved in iNaturalist, you basically take a picture of something in your garden on a flower. You don't know what it is, so you put it up there. Somebody's going to just pop up and be like, oh, that's this. And it is a tremendous source for scientific research. That is a very crowdsourced method, but I don't know any other opportunities. I think you were next.
The grass that you brought, then you said that we could bring it on home. What, is it a tall growing grass or woody grass, or what kind of grass is it?
Yeah, so information about the grass that I brought. I do have some explanatory signage with it. It is Agrostis idahoensis. It's one of the names for it is Idaho bentgrass. It's a relatively pretty short, very bluish, kind of very soft leaves. I generally try not to grow grasses for wet conditions because I really want to focus on getting people grasses that can handle dry conditions. But it was when I encountered this plant, it was just too pretty. It is very pretty. It's very charming. It doesn't look like much in photographs. It looks like nothing right now because it's winter. but it's a small one that integrates nicely with other small plants in a wet setting.
You characterized yourself as a weirdo. I'm going to suggest to you that you're in good company here.
Is your chart available for purchase or for free publicly?
The question is if the chart is available publicly. No, it's still in development, and I don't yet know how all the ways that I want to roll this out. I would like it to be publicly available, but I also am putting massive amounts of time into this and neglecting things that actually make me money. So I need to find ways that I can recoup my time for this, and so various data-intensive projects that I'm doing like this, it has kind of been on my back burner to try to find ways of like maybe there are grants or something like that, so I can take these things, not have them, take them out from behind the paywall, take them out of my consulting realm and just put them out publicly. I would like this information to be free. I just don't yet know how to do it.
Can I just, is there somebody else?
I think you're in charge, so you get to go first.
I can butt in. I just wanted to mention that now you build these, right, so these bat houses and bird houses too, so those are available on your website, but preferably for pickup.
So Marion was mentioning the bat houses and bird houses that I build. They're also, along with plants, available in my online store. I love it when you get the bat houses for pickup, because it's big and it's heavy and it's a real pain to ship, and it's going to cost you a pretty penny to get it shipped to you. But I can ship it. I think the shipping is maybe like $65, $70.
And could you just maybe explain just a little bit more about that bat house, because it's different than the little tiny one.
So I'm going to explain about this bat house and why it is giant. So you'll see pretty commonly, you can buy online, you can see plans of how to build your own bat house. But the bat houses that these plans have and you can buy online are generally like pretty small, and they only have one chamber in them. The small ones are only good enough to be a roost to sleep in. This giant one, I'm going to set this down. This giant bat house is made to be a nursery house. If you see, it has 4 parallel chambers. And the benefit of the 4 chambers is that when a female gives birth and is spending the days in here, they're not able to be, they have a lot more constraints than the adults in the rest of the year have. And so these 4 parallel chambers have gaps, holes that go through. So this bat house is put up facing south, so all throughout the day it's getting sun on it. It's nice and toasty for those little bats to stay warm. And it means that there's chambers to adjust to the temperature of that moment of the day. And so they can always be at just the right temperature. And so those small bat houses, bats can find places to roost normally, but if you want to support bats for a nursery, one of these giant ones is really this is the recommendation of Bats Conservation International and other conservation organizations. They say this is the whole way to go, and those little ones, you might feel nice putting it up, but it's not going to do a whole lot as far as the preservation and the supporting your local bat populations. And then the birdhouse that I brought today, Marion bought. This is the Peterson box. It's a little funky looking. It was developed over the course of several decades by a fellow whose first name I'm blanking on, but his last name is Peterson. And over the course of several decades, he developed this house to be exactly the optimized conditions for bluebirds. So this is developed for bluebird conservation. The front swings open, real nice and wide. And it has wonderful drainage, wonderful ventilation. And so this is another of the very ecologically driven houses. And I do make aesthetic variations on the plans that I find. But I always, when I am doing aesthetic variation of the houses that I build, I'm still sticking to the recommendations of the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. So it's the same interior volume, same floor area, same distance from the hole to the floor. And so these are very ecologically driven designs. And I do have also a bat house, a nursery bat house that is the same dimensions as this, except shaped like a coffin.
Oh, yeah.
Which is real fun.
I just wanted to know, how do the bats get in and out of that?
Oh yeah, the question of how the bats get in and out. So it's hanging on a building or whatever like this, and the bats, this is grooved, so the bats land, grab onto this, and they just crawl up into the chambers. They enter from below. And this is a very good imitation of, like if you have a tree that has been damaged and has cracks that are kind of cracked into sheets, there imitates also how bark might get kind of loose. It is very much the same kind of conditions that they would be getting from big, old, damaged or dead trees, which is something that we don't have much of on the landscape because with the history of logging, we have single age stands of young trees. So this is imitating those big old snags.
Any other burning questions anybody have?